Ah, paint me you have, I see. May the Force be with you.
Thanks very much for that, Yoda, and may the Force be with you also. Okay, we're going to start with our preliminary sketch today of the old Yoda. Not young Yoda, but old Yoda. And we're going to sketch him straight onto a loose leaf A3 size piece of canvas. Now what I'd like to do is produce some mood for the background, which will really push Yoda forward, because he's got some lighter colours of greens and some, let's say, some tans. It's really going to let your eye focus on Yoda. So to get that moody or broody background, I've chose some Indian red and some Mars black. And if you don't have Mars black, which is really just a very, very warm black with some brown accents, just go and get yourself some raw umber, which is a pretty standard acrylic colour, and just mix in some black to that colour, and that'll give you that Mars black. And just for a moment here, while we're focusing on backgrounds, I'd just like to say that with a background, you really don't want them to be too busy. For instance, you really want to be able to push your subject forward so that the minute the viewer looks at your artwork, they're going to know exactly what to look at. If you've got the background too busy, your eye's going to sort of start to stray all over the painting, and really the background just serves the purpose of pushing our subject, which is our old Jedi Master, forward and into the limelight. Now I've mixed up some Monastral green here with some olive green, and that's Monastral's almost like a fluorescent green, very, very light colour, quite stark, so the olive green will start to bring that accent back a little. Now another great tip while I'm on it is that when you start to paint in, let's say your underglaze for what I'm doing here for painting out Yoda, don't worry about when you're painting your background if you start to paint over your lines. You really want to do that, because as you can see here, I'm cutting in around the ear, and it's really starting to, let's say, make Yoda's whole appearance stand out from the background. Now if you notice the back corners of the painting there, you can see that that's actually the interior of Yoda's ear. So that's just a Indian red mixed with some Mars black. And now I'm just starting to introduce some lighter colours. Now I'm painting wet into wet, which makes it easier to blend. Now acrylics do dry very, very quickly, so you do have to work fairly fast if you do not want to use any retarders. So that can help. I don't like to use retarders myself or anything else except water, but yeah, there's a lot of product out there that you can purchase to be able to, let's say, turn the acrylic into more of an oil medium. Now I don't know if you picked up there, but I was using a white charcoal pencil just to map out the furrows on Yoda's forehead there. And the great thing about using a charcoal pencil is that later on, after the painting's completely dry, you can wipe away any, let's say, excess drawing or marks that you don't want to be included into your painting away with just a damp cloth. And just getting back to Yoda's ear there's some raw sienna dark mixed in there as well, along with the raw umber and Indian red. Now just with the eyelids here with Yoda's eye, I am just starting to use the same mix of the Monastral green and the olive green, but I'm just introducing some more white. This not only helps me accentuate all his little wrinkles and highlights, it also gives me a little bit of a roadmap as to where to go as I start to progress with this underglaze of mapping out Yoda's face. Now I'll speed up the process here a little just so that you can still see what I'm doing, but I'm not going to waste your time by having to watch every little, let's say, brush stroke. And I do apologise for my speech. I am Australian, I have a pretty thick accent, and I also will stumble and stutter quite a lot. I'm not a professional speaker. But having said that, let's move into some of the darker shadows of Yoda's face. Again, it'll just be the raw umber that I'm using here, and it really is just a matter of underglazing. I'm just going throughout the whole face, mapping it out, not trying to blend it, not trying to get it perfect at this stage. And that is a trap. You can start to, let's say, over accentuate And what I've done here, I've just started to get frustrated with the whole process. I've started to work too much on the detail too early, and then I've realised I've actually used too much pigment for the green. So what I've done there, I've just mixed up what you call a glaze and started to paint that over the face that I've already done. That just softened the whole appearance. And now that I've got Yoda's face to a pigment that I'm happy with, I can really concentrate on the detail. And speaking of detail, here I'm using raw umber, which is my main colour for mapping out Yoda's face. Now I get that I'm going to upset a lot of Yoda fans out there by adding a little bit of blue to his eyes, because when you Google Yoda's eyes, they're actually apparently hazel. But I thought, for a little bit of artistic license, why not just add a little bit of blue? Just give our ancient Jedi Master a little glint of, let's say, mischievous handsomeness to his overall appearance. And for the colours of the eye, I'm using antique white for the white of the eye, and for the pupil I'm using raw umber, Indian red and carbon black for the darker parts of the pupil. When painting eyes in particular, it's better to have them further apart than too close together. What I like to do as a guide is just use that first eye that I've painted, and then across the bridge of the nose I'll pretty much measure 3/4 to a full length of the eye, and that's where I'll start the next eye. And it just keeps the whole face in proportion. Now, I hope that made sense, but if it didn't, then hit me up in the comments so I can explain a little bit better. I've just fast forwarded a little bit there, but I did use some straight olive green for the cheekbone. And yes, you guessed it, raw umber for his mouth. Now, notice how I'm holding the brush. I've actually got it right at the end of the brush there, and I'm just dragging that over the canvas. That allows me to have more control. Now, this is a round or a fine liner brush. Now, next to my artwork there, you can't see it, but I've got 1,000 different brushes, and now I've transitioned over to a 10mm flat brush, and I'm just dragging that colour down, which is raw umber, over the face, and I'm transitioning between white, some raw umber, like I said earlier, and some olive green. Now, there's another thing I'd like to point out. See that right cheekbone, which is, well, his left cheekbone, but it's right on the screen. It's very, very stark. I'll soften that down like I did earlier with the glaze. Now, just using some straight titanium white and a 15mm flat brush, I'm just going to start feathering that over Yoda's scalp in such a way that it'll look like some wispy old white grey hair and give him that, let's say, 900-year-old wizened look that Yoda seems to have. Apparently he lived to about 900 years, or so they do. Now, here's something a lot of people don't know, is that before Master Yoda got fed up with the whole scene and exiled himself to Dagobah, he actually spent a little bit of time on Earth. And while he was there, he got a job being a car salesman. Now, he was trying to stay under the radar and away from the evil empire, and he thought that wearing a purple shirt might be a little bit loud and a little bit out there. So he decided to go a little bit more incognito and get himself a white business shirt. And of course, a wise choice being Yoda, because at the time a lot of his success was due to the fact that he did look a lot like one of his favourite Hollywood actors, Danny DeVito. And he found that the white shirt was not only a little more subtle, but he could also emulate one of his favourite 70s characters, Columbo, who, like Yoda, was a rather quirky character but could use the Force. And just as we move into Yoda's ear, I'd just like to clarify that I'd actually made all that up. Now, for those really dark areas of Yoda's ear, I'm using carbon black, and I'm just letting all that sort of blend in wet into wet. And here's another great tip, and that is being right-handed. I've managed to train myself into the habit of working from top left-hand corner to bottom right, or from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. This helps me not drag my hand all over my previous work, thus ruining my day and wrecking all my artwork. And obviously it's fine once the paint's dry, but it's just a lesson I've taught myself, and it's just really done me well over the years. Now, Yoda's overcoat has been painted in antique white, raw umber and a little bit of raw sienna dark, with just a touch of carbon black in the really darker areas under his collar or folds of his overcoat. Now, you may have noticed that I had Master Yoda, I should say, taped down to a little bit of 3mm MDF. I did change it throughout the painting a couple of times, but it was just taped down with a little bit of painter's masking tape, which is really good because it doesn't leave any residue on your canvas. And the great thing about having him on a little piece of MDF is that I can move it from place to place. And just so you understood that it was actually on the least leaf piece of paper, here I am wobbling him from side to side. And you'll just notice here that I haven't put Yoda slap bang in the middle of the canvas or right in the middle of the page. What I've done is managed to just get him over to the left side a little bit. That way it just adds a little bit more interest to the overall look.